everyone, welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be talking about Father's Day recommendations, which is coming up this Sunday. So happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. And let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with some good fathers, and then we'll talk about ones that are kind of in the middle, and then we'll talk about some bad fathers, and then we'll talk about some father figures. So hopefully you'll find some good books to read this month. So when I talk about good fathers, I have to mention Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This is one of my favorite books, and it has a very good father representation in this book. And this is a grief horror, so not a good time to be a father. Stephen King does an amazing job in this book with his character development and with showing what a good father this man in this book is. So I have another grief horror that I want to talk about that's a little bit less known. It's called Naomi's Room by Jonathan Aycliffe. This is also a classic. I actually have not personally read this yet, but this is also a grief horror about a couple who lose their child. It does say that Charles and Laura are a young, happily married couple inhabiting the privileged world of Cambridge academia. Brimming with excitement, Charles sets off with his daughter Naomi on a Christmas Eve to do some shopping in London. But by the end of the day, all Charles and his wife have left are cups of tea and police sympathy. For Naomi, their beautiful, angelic only child has disappeared, and days later, her murdered body is discovered. So that's like every parent's worst nightmare. So it's a short little novella, so I hope to get to it soon. Maybe I'll read it in December since it takes place on Christmas Eve, or at least some of it. Okay, another one that I have not read yet, but I hear it has really good father representation is The Changeling by Victor LaValle. You can tell from the title what this is about, but basically there's this father and he has this new child, but his wife is going through postpartum depression and she ends up either killing herself or disappearing or something happens. It just says that there's a bad event that happens, but it doesn't tell you what that is. And so he is on a journey. They call it an odyssey, so I wonder if it's going to have like fairy tale elements or a mythological feel to it. But it says that this father is on the hunt to find his missing wife and child. I hear good things about Victor LaValle. I haven't read any of his stuff yet, but I hear this is one of his best ones, so I'm excited to get to this one soon. Then we have one that's not a horror novel. It's called 52 Reasons Why I Hate My Father, which sounds like it's going to be about a bad father, but it's not. It's because she's a spoiled, rich teenage girl and her father's trying to raise her right and help her not be spoiled and selfish, and she doesn't like that. But I really like this book because it has a lot of character development. You know, she starts out one way, and then by the end of the book, she kind of straightens out her life and realizes how selfish she's been and that her father was only trying to help her be a better person. I really enjoyed this one. It's been many, many years since I've read it, but I remember really liking it. So if you like YA books, then I would recommend this one. And then we have Athena by Heather Moore. This is part of a series. It's called the Newport Ladies Book Club. It's about a group of women who come together as part of book club. And then each book is based on a different woman in that book club and the troubles and trials and tribulations that they're going through, and then the friendships that they make at this book club. So this one is starring Athena, and her father has dementia. And so she has him living with her, and she's dealing with all the complications that come with having a parent who is not in their right mind anymore, and all the grief that can come as a part of that, because even though they're not gone, they're not dead, but they are gone in a sense, you know, because he doesn't recognize her and he's always wandering off, and she's having to deal with that, which is a really hard thing to do. I apologize if you guys can hear my kids. It's summertime and it's really hard to have a quiet moment to do these videos. So if you can hear my kids yelling and screaming in the background, I apologize. Okay, so next we have Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. And this one is a lot like Rosemary's Baby. So if you like that classic, then I think you would really like this one. Although it does have a bit of a twist to it that's supernatural. So this is about a couple who move into this creepy apartment, but it's like the apartment in Rosemary's Baby where it has the gargoyles and it's like rich hoity-toity apartment, and but they win this housing lottery and they get the chance to live here and they're so excited. But the wife is a little bit hesitant because she had some complications during childbirth and it left her paralyzed. And so she's in a wheelchair, and the apartment that's available is on the top floor. And so she's like, if there's a fire, I'm not going to have any way to get down here. So I really enjoyed this one because normally with this type of story, you only get the woman's point of view. But in this book, you actually get the husband's point of view as well. And so I really enjoyed that aspect. I liked seeing him being a new father and dealing with a wife who had postpartum depression in the past and who was dealing with the complications of this childbirth. And it shows that he's also going through a lot and it's been difficult for him as well. And so I really appreciated that. So I really enjoyed this book. I did have a little bit of issues with the ending, which I can't really go into because it's spoilery, but other than that, I really enjoyed this one. And then we have Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. I don't even need to tell you what this is about, really, because everybody and their dog has heard of this book. But anyway, so Bella Swan, she's normally lives with her mother in Phoenix, Arizona, but she gets the opportunity to live with her father and because her parents are divorced, and so she moves to Washington to be with her dad. And this is another case where he's a good father. He doesn't quite know what he's doing. He's not used to dealing with having a teenage daughter living in his house. But I really like it because it turns out that Bella and her father are actually very similar in personality, and so they mesh well together. And I like seeing their bond start to deepen and start to blossom throughout the book. So this is a good one for father rep as well. Then we have All Hallows by Christopher Golden. And this isn't super heavy on the father relationships, but at the beginning and the end of this book, there's this father and his daughter, and they're putting together this haunted hollow or this haunted woods attraction in their hometown. And apparently they put it on every year, and it's just like a thing that him and his daughter do together every October. And I thought it was very sentimental and cute, and it kind of ends the same way that it begins. He's one of the good fathers that's trying to help protect his family, and there's drama going around in the town, but he's just trying to be there for his kids and for his wife. So I really enjoyed this book a lot. I would highly recommend reading this in October because the Halloween vibes are fantastic in this book. Okay, and then we have a couple of books by Clay Malloy Chapman, starting with Whisper Down the Lane. And this one also has really good October vibes because it has hay rides and corn mazes and October festivals and that kind of stuff. So I would recommend also reading this in October. But anyway, so this dad, he is raising his son, and he's also a teacher, so he does a lot of things with children. And so I think if you're looking for a book about fathers, this would also be a good one. It would scratch that itch. This book has to do with the Satanic Panic, which I found very intriguing and interesting. And then we have What Kind of Mother? And yes, the title says mother, not father, but really, I mean, it is about a mother, but I feel like it was more about the father because he was the one that had lost his son, and his son went missing in his crib when he was only a few months old, and he's been trying to find his son for 5 years. And so he goes to this palm reader to see if she has any insight into his missing son. And so even though it's called What Kind of Mother, and it does kind of veer towards the mother towards the end, I do think a lot of this book has to do with fatherhood as well, and the lengths that you would go to find your child. Then we have Burning Girls by C.J. Tudor. I have not read this one yet, so I don't actually know if this is a good father or a bad father. I just know that there's a reverend who is raising his daughter in this little small town, and different things go down. I'm assuming this has religious, demonic things in it. I hear it's really good, and I'm excited to read it. But yeah, that's pretty much all I know about this book. Okay, so now I'm going to get into a couple of books that are kind of good and kind of bad. The first one I don't really know because I haven't read it yet, but it's called The Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. And this one, it sounds like he starts out as a good father, like there's nothing bad about him. He's not abusive. He's a good dad to his daughter, but I feel like he has some secrets in his past, and something else is going on that she doesn't know about, and so I feel like he could end up being a bad father. She just doesn't realize it yet. But anyways, this is about a father and his daughter who are living out in the woods away from everybody because, like I said, apparently something happened in his past and he wants to raise his child away from the world and away from the hectic city life. And so they're just in this little remote cabin in the woods all by themselves. This one I'm hoping to get to in January because it's got those snowy vibes to it. So, speaking of gray fathers, we're talking about The Secret Garden. So, I think most people already know this story, but the father in here, he's not a bad guy per se, but he loses his wife and he's grieving and he doesn't know how to be a father to this child by himself. You know, he doesn't know how to be a single dad. And so he becomes very neglectful. And so he leaves his child in the care of others while he goes on business trips all the time. And his child is sickly and he's in bed constantly. He doesn't ever leave the house. And so he's not meaning to be a bad dad, but he is because he's neglecting his son. But then by the end, he comes to realize what a gift his son is and how stupid he's been for not spending time with him. So it's kind of a redemption story. So I like that. Okay, so now we're going to get into the not so good fathers. So I'm going to start this off with probably the most famous, which would be The Shining by Stephen King. So this one I would also kind of put in the both category, to be honest, because if you watch the Kubrick movie, you're gonna just think, man, this father's awful and terrible. But if you read the book, I feel like he was a good dad in the beginning. He was just a normal father, but it's the Overlook Hotel that drives him crazy and possesses him and makes him into the terrible father that he becomes. And I feel like in the movie, he's just kind of terrible throughout. Like, you never see him be a good dad, so he kind of has a bad rap that way. So anyways, if for some reason you don't know what this is about, there's this family that moved to this hotel called the Overlook Hotel during the winter time to upkeep it and to maintain it during the winter months when it's closed to the public, and to just make sure everything's running, make sure the pipes don't freeze, that kind of thing. And so it's very creepy because there's just this not abandoned, but you know, they're just in this hotel by themselves for all these months, you know, and so it's big and it's isolated and it's lonely and you can't get to help very easily because of the snow. So it's a very, very good setting for a book. And this father is possessed by some of the spirits that are haunting this hotel, and he tries to murder his family with an axe. So, anyways, not the father of the year, but not really technically his fault either. So there's that. And then another Stephen King book that has a bad father in it would be his novella called 1922. And I will admit I have not actually read this book. I just saw the movie, but man, this dad is terrible. He's one of the worst fathers I've ever seen in movies or literature. So I don't really want to say why though. I don't know if it's a spoiler, and honestly, this book is just so short. So I'm just gonna let you take my word for it that he's a terrible guy. And this is a very gritty, gruesome story, but I did enjoy it. And then we have A History of Fear by Luc Dumas. And this one, this man has a complicated relationship with his father because it turns out that he's gay, but his dad isn't approving of it, but then his dad also turns out to be gay or something. So they're both kind of fighting that, you know, the dad was fighting against it, and then his son is also fighting against being what he is. And so there's a lot of just tension between this father and son because of it. That's not really a big part of the story though. It's not really about that, but it does have it in it, so I just thought I would include it. And speaking of fathers not being okay with their sons being gay, I'm going to talk about a book called Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And this one could also go in the both category because they start out not very good because they're not okay with their sons being gay together. And they hate that idea and they're not okay with it, they don't like it. But after their sons are murdered during a hate crime, all of a sudden they're like, realizing what terrible fathers that they were. And so the two men that were in a relationship together, their fathers, both came together and was like, we need to track down the people that killed our sons and we need to get our revenge. So, in that sense, they're kind of being good fathers because they're trying to posthumously make it up to their sons in a way, but they weren't nice to them in life, and they're not necessarily even good people, but they're trying to do right by their sons later on. So I don't know. They're not the best fathers, but they're trying to make it up. So they're kind of good fathers. I don't know. It's complicated. But anyway, so this one I would kind of put in the both category. They're kind of bad, they're kind of not. They're just human. Okay, then we have Little Girls by Ronald Malfi, and I also have not read this one. But on the back, it says, after years away, Lori returns to the home where she was raised by a cold, distant father who recently exorcised his demons, but no amount of cleaning can wipe away the troubled past. She feels it lurking in the broken molding, seeing it staring from an empty picture frame, hears it laughing in the moldy greenhouse deep in the woods. So, sounds like her father was not a good father. He was probably abusive. And this is a ghost story, and I love ghost stories, and I like Ronald Malfi, so I picked this one up at Target a couple of years ago, actually. It's been sitting on my shelf for a while. I just haven't got to it. And then we have The Selection by Kiera Cass. And this one was hugely popular a few years ago, so you've probably heard of this series. But if for some reason you haven't, this is a dystopian novel set in the future where America has become a kingdom rather than a democracy. And so you have a king and a queen that now rule America. And then you have this, sorry for the stupid airplanes. I live right next to the base, and so we get airplanes flying above our heads constantly, so I apologize for that. But anyway, so they hold what's called The Selection, where they have a bunch of ladies come and compete for the hand of the prince to become the next princess and then eventually the next queen of the United States. So this girl, who's actually named America, ironically, comes to the palace to vie for his hand, but she doesn't really want to because she's actually in love with somebody back home. But he doesn't think he's good enough for her and that she deserves a better life, and he's actually the one that puts in the application for her to go to the palace in the first place. So she's pretty pissed off about it. And then when she gets there, comes to find out that the boy that she loved back home ends up being a guard at the palace. And so now she's dealing with her feelings for him, but she's kind of starting to have feelings for the prince now that she's met him. But I love this series so much. It's fantastic. It's one of my very favorite YA novels of all time. Love it, love it, love it. The prince, his father, the king, is not a good guy. He's not nice to his son, and he's terrible. And I was sickened when I learned what he was doing to his son. So there's that. That's why I included it in this list. So now we're going to get into some father figures. So these aren't actual fathers, but they are a part of a child's life and fill that void for them. So the first one is Plank Children by Michael Schutz. And this is about a man whose nephew went missing. And so he's desperately trying to find him because they had a really close relationship and a bond, and he wants to know what happened to his nephew. So he travels to like this orphanage that's haunted or something to try and find him because he heard somehow he ended up there. But anyways, I haven't read this one yet, but it sounds really good. It sounds up my alley. It's got a really creepy cover, so I hope to get to this one fairly soon. And then we have Bag of Bones by Stephen King. And this is about a man who moves to this town, and he kind of falls for this woman who's a single mother, and so she has a daughter, and so he kind of takes the role of father to this little family, but then other things go down, and he's trying to protect them and help them from the bad people that are in this town. And then another one of my favorite YA novels of all time would be Rotten Ruin by Jonathan Mayberry. And this one has a fantastic father representation in the form of a brother who is being a father figure to his younger brother. So this is a zombie novel. The zombie outbreak happened when our main character was just a baby. He was like a year and a half old or something. And so his brother rescues him from the apocalypse and runs away with him. But he's always been super mad and upset with his brother because he feels like he abandoned his parents to the zombies. And he's super upset about that. And it's actually his half brother. So it's like his mom married his brother's father. So they're only half siblings, but still. So this brother that saved his little brother from the zombie apocalypse, he's now forced to raise him in this new world and do the best that he can. And I love Tom Imara so much. I love him to death. He's one of my favorite characters. He takes care of our main character, whose name is Benny, and I think he does a fantastic job. He's a very heroic person, even if his brother doesn't realize it yet. So I really liked the character development in this book, and I really enjoy this book. So if you like zombie books, then I highly recommend this series. And then we have the most controversial father figure in all of literature, which would be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Because no, he's not technically his father, but he did create him and he did give him life like a father. And that's all Frankenstein's monster wants, is to have a father and to have a parent to love him and care for him and look after him. And when Victor Frankenstein does not live up to that, he gets very upset and murderous about it. So this is my favorite classic story of all time. Absolutely love this book. And I don't know, I guess a little bit controversial because most people are like, oh, Victor Frankenstein, we hate him, he's terrible. But I actually had a lot of sympathy for him when I first read this book, and I still to this day do, because there's no way he would have known what his creation would have done, which is kind of the point, is he's dealing with the consequences of a dumb, stupid mistake that he made. And so I do have sympathy for Victor Frankenstein, but obviously I also have a lot of sympathy for his creation. And so I love the nuance, I love the emotional impact that this book has when it's dealing with taking responsibility for your mistakes and owning up to them and all of that. So very, very good, very complicated father figure relationship. So in that same vein, I have a couple of books, and the fathers, they're not necessarily bad fathers to their daughters, but they're not good people, if that makes sense. And they're in that same classic vein. So we have The Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd. And this is the daughter of Dr. Moreau. And this has other classic tales in it as well. I think it also has Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I think it also has Frankenstein. So this is a trilogy, a YA trilogy. And so it has to do with a few mashups of classic monsters. But she's the daughter of Dr. Moreau. Her name's Juliette Moreau. And then sticking with that, we have The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And this is the same thing like The Madman's Daughter, where she's the daughter of Dr. Moreau and she's trying to deal with her father who's experimenting on these animal-human hybrids, and she's having to deal with the repercussions of that. And then we have The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. And I think this one also has a few different ones. So yeah, this also has Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in it, as well as Sherlock Holmes. Is there any other ones? Yep, and Justine Frankenstein. So this is like The Madman's Daughter, where there's a few different mashups of classic monsters in here. So I haven't read this one yet, but I am excited to. Same with The Madman's Daughter. I have read The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, and I liked it in the beginning a lot, and then towards the middle and the rest of the book, I kind of just didn't like it as much. But I haven't read The Madman's Daughter or this one, but I'm very excited to read them because I love old classic books. I love classic story mashups. I've actually written a few myself. I wrote Dracula Ascending, which is Frankenstein mashed up with Dracula. Then I did Fall of the House of Crane, which is The Haunting of Hill House mashed up with select stories by Edgar Allan Poe. And then I did The Strange Case of Dorian Gray, which is the picture of Dorian Gray mashed up with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So you could say I'm a huge fan of classics and of mashups, so I'm excited to get to them. Those are all the Father's Day recommendations I have for you. I hope you found some new books to add to your TBR, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please comment below if you've read any of these books and which ones were your favorite. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video from me. And don't forget to like this video. And I'll catch you next time. See ya!